It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
All right, question from Frank. Talking about the 3-bucket strategy, why is it recommended to have pre-tax and Roth retirement accounts? Is there a disadvantage to having just Roth and after-tax brokerage?
You know, Frank, it's not a disadvantage. It's more a practicality of how you build up your assets. If you're someone who's above 30% between your federal and your state, it's really hard to walk away from that current year tax benefit. You know, I mean, think about if you're someone in your 30s or 40s, you know your dollars still have a lot of juice in them. We always think about that in terms of, okay, well, if I put this dollar inside of my Roth IRA, it's going to, compound tax-free, then that's awesome. But think about the tax savings. If you are someone in those 30%, maybe even with the state, you get up into 40%, it is really, really, really hard to walk away from that current year tax benefit. So when we look at most people who build up their 3 buckets, it kind of ends up happening out of necessity. Well, I was in these years where my income was really, really high, and so I did pre-tax. But when I was early on in my career, I did Roth and I did tax-free. So I think a lot of it is just based on where you are in your life cycle, and that's kind of how the buckets begin to be built.
Let's create a teachable illustration here on both extremes of this, because I think this will help people see why the logic lies where it is. Sure. A young person. Let's just say you're a young person in your 20s, you're starting to save and invest. It's a no-brainer that you're probably not making your peak earnings years, but you have maximum opportunity for compounding growth because you have time on your side. Even if you choose a full 100% Roth strategy, more than likely, if you have an employer plan that has matching or some type of profit sharing, you're still going to have tax-deferred money, because even though all your contributions are going in Roth and growing tax-free, because they didn't get a deduction on the initial, but they grow tax-free on the compounding, your employer on anything they put in is going to go in pre-tax.
That's right.
So that's why even if you are 100% Roth, if you're in that type of plan, you will still have another bucket there just because of your employer money. Now let's go to the extreme of somebody who's in a high income situation. Let's say you're in a high income situation that actually gets you into the tippity top of the tax rates federally. That's 37%. Now let's say you're in the tippity top of the states that really hit income. So you live in like California,
Sure,
where you're paying like 13% of your income taxes to the state, plus the 37% to the federal government. And we're not even getting into all the payroll taxes and the other things and self-employment taxes, but you were at 50% before we even add any other tax. You can't tell me the thought that at 50% taxes, where you're basically splitting the money with the government at that point, you don't say, hey, maybe it makes sense to put that money in pre-tax, because I'm essentially getting, the government is funding half of my contribution. That's once again another toss of what free money looks like. If the government's going to essentially fund half of my contribution because I'm going to save 50 cents on the dollar by making this, don't miss out on that opportunity.
But if you are someone who maybe you just live a super, super frugal lifestyle, you're in a lower income tax bracket, and you have the ability to build all your assets on the Roth side, that's not a horrible thing. We're not saying that you have to have a pre-tax bucket. It's just in most circumstances that we see people end up with a pre-tax bucket because of exactly what Brian just described.